Our friend Mercy Health's Dr. Dennis Norem is joining us once again here on a Monday and talk a little COVID-19. Dr. Norem, good morning to you.
Good morning to you guys.
How you doing this morning?
So far, so good. The sun's shining, no rain. That's nice.
Now, you fall under the expert category. You getting this cabin fever, this quarantine fatigue, whatever the common name for it is?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like it's Groundhog Day. Every day we get up and have to do the same thing. And, we've been at this now 5-6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't even remember.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it's gotten in many people's heads, and forgetting what day it was. And is it Wednesday? No, it's a Monday. Oh, man, if it seemed like a Friday, I'm not sure kind of what day it is. And that's the one angle on this that's not getting as much ink as the others, and that's the mental angle on this lockdown on people.
Absolutely. A lot of concern about the mental health consequences. You just don't hear much about what's going on with that because all the focus is on the medical, physical aspects of COVID-19. But you really got to wonder what's going on in a lot of households who are stuck, not able to get out and do things.
Any recommendation for anybody? Any mental exercise? Anything to change the focus? Any way of approaching this that might be beneficial?
Well, I think we may have mentioned this in the past, is communicate. I think there's a tendency when you get a little down about things, people kind of withdraw and don't communicate with others. It's a good chance, again, to call friends you haven't talked to in a while. I mean, if you have access to a computer, there's a lot of good programs, Zoom, those kind of things. Set up little conferences, meetings. I know that's something my wife is doing, and able to talk to friends, family that you haven't seen in a while.
Do you guys have a plan of where you're going to run to first when this is lifted?
We want to take a vacation.
Okay.
No, actually, we had planned to take a trip out west, national parks, Grand Canyon. So we're holding our breath. I mean,
it's a good thing to do these days.
The more I think about that and think, I just took it for granted 6 months ago we were going to do that, and now it's just all tentative.
Yeah, but I think it's a common sentiment that when the all clear is official and in place and all that. Okay, look, first off, I need to get out. I need to go do something. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people, it's I need to go back to work.
Well, fortunately for me, I'm still working a little bit part time, so I do get out of the house. So it's not so bad for me in terms of that mental health and the interaction. It's just harder on family members who can't get out of the house, who really have to be careful.
Dr. Norm, I just read a new piece published a couple of days back saying senior citizens show atypical coronavirus symptoms being reported by some doctors.
Well, I think that's not surprising. Many illnesses in the seniors are not the same as what we see in the younger people. As the immune system matures, it doesn't always react in the same way. Classic example I've seen over the years, and we teach the students this, is you'll have an elderly patient who'll have some confusion. And the first thought always is, well, if an older person has confusion, maybe they've had a stroke. But oftentimes they have an infection. They'll have no fever, no cough, none of the usual things that you'd expect with, say, pneumonia, or common infections such as bladder infections. They'll have no symptoms. But the first thing you'll find is just a mental status change. And oftentimes it'll take hours or sometimes days before the classic symptoms develop. So not surprising.
Conversely to elderly showing different symptoms, COVID toes was a big thing that went around last week as a sign in young patients. What do you know about COVID toes?
Well, I don't know too much. I saw that report also about this unusual rashes and reddened toes. Not sure what to make of that, but it probably relates to the vascular effects. You've probably been hearing about the problem, especially in younger people, of blood clots. The COVID virus seems to interfere with the clotting system, and a lot of patients become gravely ill because they suddenly develop multiple blood clots. So I suspect that's something that's affecting the vascular system, especially in the toes, at least the small vessels that are kind of the end of our circulation down in our feet. So it'll be interesting when science figures out, exactly what's going on there. Just goes to show there's so much we don't know about COVID-19.
There really are, and then there are certain things that I see the keywords and phrases on social media that people are talking about. Well, as long as I can taste and smell things, I'm fine because what is it, anosmia? As long as I'm not suffering from that, then obviously I don't have COVID-19 because that was one of the things we heard right off the bat. Oh, you lose your sense of smell, you lose your sense of taste. That means you're on the list.
Yeah, I think it illustrates the fact you can't focus on one symptom. Everybody's a little different. There's a constellation of several different symptoms, and no one person has all of those symptoms. And as you've just mentioned, you run into individuals, especially older patients, that may have none of the classic symptoms and may just not feel good. So it makes it very difficult, which gets back to our concern about trying to improve our ability to test people, which is going to be extremely important as we move further into this pandemic.
Talking about testing, we've every time you've been on, we've highlighted the importance of testing coming up. We just opened up the new drive-through facility at the University of Illinois Medical Center over there on Parkview Drive. Over the weekend was the first time that was open. All reports are it was a smooth sailing. They had enough tests. And you can show up for a test with no appointment, no doctors. It's free of charge. When should people think about taking advantage of something like this?
Well, my understanding is that there's kind of a two-test system there. Any first responder can be tested, regardless of symptoms, no symptoms. If you are not a first responder or medical person, then you would need to have some symptomatology. So again, the classic fever, loss of smell, cough, any kind of infectious symptoms. They do screening on those group of people, and they can be tested. And again, if you're a first responder, they're willing to test any of them.
Yeah, because it's a weird line we have to draw here, because we obviously want as many people tested as possible. We don't want superfluous tests to exhaust their supply. So do you know at all how stringent the qualifications of symptoms are there, or are they leaning towards testing you even if you're not, classically symptomatic?
I don't have any specific knowledge there, but just based on my own experience in my limited practice and what I see going on in my system, we're pretty liberal with testing.
Okay.
If people have anything to suggest an unusual fever, cough, then we usually would go ahead, especially if a person has risk factors. They have a history of asthma, lung disease, heart disease, anything that would make them more susceptible. We're fairly liberal about saying, hey, let's get a test.
So as a medical professional, you would suggest erring on the side of caution and going to see if you need a test, whether or not you're definitely sure you need one.
Absolutely, as long as, again, they're not exceeding their capacity. And my understanding was their capacity was up to 500 tests a day, and I think their first day was somewhere in the 350, 360 range. So it sounds like they've got enough capacity to cover everybody that's showing up. So that's great.
If you're just joining us, 16 minutes after 7, we're spending some time with Mercy Health's Dr. Dennis Norem talking COVID-19. Now, we hear with this gradual reopening of America and different places moving a little quicker than others, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. There's this worry of a second wave.
Yes.
How and then there's also, I read a column this morning saying the second wave is already here. First wave came through a lot earlier than we thought it did. We're on second wave now, so I don't know if that sets up for a third wave or whatever. How should we look at waves?
Well, I think that's part of viral pandemics in general, and I think the concept is certainly there, and we all go back to the Spanish flu of 1918 and how there were three waves there. An initial wave was fairly significant, but the second wave was much more severe and deadly, and the third wave was kind of a minor situation compared to the other two. However, we just don't know. This is a unique virus, and how it will present itself in a second wave is unclear. Looking at other flu-like viruses that we've seen in the past, we kind of see that with our flu viruses. When we get a new virus, it oftentimes will kind of hit us at the end of the flu season and not be too severe, but we'll see a smattering of cases. And then the next season, that virus will become the predominant one in terms of the flu. And then it'll kind of hang around for a couple more years and then maybe fade away as newer viruses come along. So it certainly is based on good science on viral pandemics, but we just don't know.
Speaking of second waves, personally second waves, big story I've seen a lot of news outlets carry is the fact that we don't know if you become immune to this once you catch it. From what I understand, it's just because we haven't tested for it yet. Do other coronaviruses that we've studied in the past have you built up an immunity once you catch it? And why would we think that this one would be different from others?
Well, I think the science on the other coronaviruses is, the common cold viruses. There are several different types, and we certainly develop immunity to the one that initially affects us. So the question, I think, more is how long is that immunity going to last? And that's really been the debate here. Will it last for months, years, or will it be like a lot of viral immunities where they kind of fade away over time, depending on the type of virus? So again, I think time will tell. Clearly, people get over COVID-19 and they go and resume normal activity, but we just don't know how long that immunity is going to last, and that gets back to being able to do antibody testing and surveillance.
And where are we on the antibody testing?
Well, some of those tests have been approved, and you can see that there are small studies being done on different populations, like what was done out in California, and then what we saw happen in New York, which was very interesting. I think it was in Brooklyn, they tested 3,000 people, and they estimate their exposure rate at maybe as high as 15 to 20% now based on their testing. But it's still not readily available to us for general population testing.
Dr. Norem, before we let you go, we've hit you with a ton of questions, and I know you've done a massive amount of research, and you're reading this stuff, you're living it every single day. What haven't we asked you about, or what have you picked up on or gleaned over the last week since last we spoke that people should know about?
Well, the one thing I think I just mentioned, which is kind of an interesting sidelight in light of the president's comments last week, is there's been a spike of about 20% in poisoning concerns. Unfortunately, the antiseptics and the products that we're using are toxic, and I want to make people clear that be careful with things like bleach and alcohol. Make sure you keep your alcohol sanitizers and things away from children, and when you use bleaching products, make sure you don't bleach your food and mix them with things like vinegar, which causes chlorine gas and can make you very sick. So you can be a little overzealous with those products, but be careful with them.
One last thing for you two here. Talking about vaccines, we've heard, it takes 18 months to 2 years to do a vaccine. Some companies are saying, no, we've cut that back to 6 months. Where do you sit on the likelihood of getting a vaccine done soon?
I think best case scenario is probably a year. They're just doing the initial safety studies, and that'll take months. And then, assuming that they're safe, they can turn around and do the clinical studies. So you're probably looking at a year, maybe 9 to 10 months.
9 to 10 months, like a best case scenario for you, as far as you're concerned.
Scenario.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, assuming all red tape gets thinned out and things move along the way you would hope that they would, about a year. Okay, Dr. Norem, as always, we appreciate you taking time out of your day and the expertise. And if you're willing, we would love to have you join us as long as we're continuing to have this as topic number one.
I will be glad to, guys. We'll see you next week.
We'll look forward to it.